Okay, this is the big one. Now we're going to get into redrawing our inspector and customizing it because maybe we want to, for example, hide some information if another thing is flagged. So maybe we can flag some monsters as never being able to get into combat, right? Like maybe you see them on the world map and they run away or whatever. So they don't really have combat stats, but maybe we still want to define them as a monster. There's many other things, right? Like maybe you have custom stats you want to show if they're undead, or maybe if they don't drop anything, you don't even want to give them a chance to drop an item. If we want to do any kind of shifting around like that, then we would typically need to just redraw our inspector and customize it however we want. It's a huge pain. It gives us a lot of control, but it's kind of a hassle to set up, especially if you want to do it the proper way. So anyways, let's take a look at that. So first, like I was saying in my example, maybe I want this monster to not be able to enter combat, and if it is in combat, or if it is able to enter combat, then I want to show the combat stats. If not, I want to hide him, and this will just be a little boolean. So I'm going to come into my monster data. I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to add a serialized field private bool underscore can enter combat. Oh, combat. We'll default this to true, but maybe we can disable it for certain enemies. Also remember, if we want us to be able to see it publicly, we'll also give a float. Can enter combat. Can enter combat. Oh, it's not a float, it's a bool. Okay. All right, and we can get that if we need it. So really what we want to do is we want to check, and if CanEnterCombat is false, we want to not draw our combat stats. But in order to get there, we need to essentially redraw everything, right? Like if you see it recompiled and we can see it now, we want to hide all this when that's not checked and show it when that is checked. So essentially it's going to be a condition, right? We'll say if it is true, then draw these, otherwise don't. We're drawing our base inspector. We don't want to draw our base inspector anymore, right? Like we don't want to just draw this. We want to customize it. Instead of redrawing this, we want to not do this, right? So I'm going to comment it out. And instead, we need to redraw it ourselves. So it's going to be hard, but I think it's good practice just to mess with a few different data types and see how you could start drawing things to the inspector. Another example, like maybe you don't want the designer to be able to define a particular stat, but you do still want it to be associated with the monster. So for example, maybe all monsters uniformly have the same walking speed or have the same turning speed or something. Maybe you don't want the designers to mess with that because it'll break the code. You can still put that inside the data, but just not expose it to the designer. Technically you could just, have that as a private variable in here. The data is inside of the class, but we're just defining what we want to draw in the inspector and what we want to expose to the designer. And having that amount of control can be very helpful in some scenarios. For now, we're just going to redraw a dog because it's good practice. And here we go. Okay, so a couple other things that might be relevant to us. If we want to do this the proper way, we want to access their serialized properties instead of just doing it at the target. And I think it relates to some other editor functions, and like maybe it's highlighting or something. You can see because we commented that out where it's not redrawing it. I honestly can't remember, but I know it's the proper way to do it. So we'll do it the proper way. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. The very top, we're going to store all of our variables that we want to access at the very top. We're going to call this a serialized property. And we, honestly, at this point, we just have to put it side by side, right? Like we need to figure out what we want to show. And we'll, maybe we just do it like this. I'm just going to copy paste this. Very top. And we are going to just edit this instead. So serialized property, I'll change this. Private, serialized property. All right, I'm just gonna, all these will be of type serialized property. Okay. And we will do this. So we're making these empty variables. Seems like a hassle right now, but if we can capture the property, it's really easy to draw it on a line. We just say draw the property and it'll figure it out. Oh, I see. Get rid of this one at the top. This is what we wanted. Okay. And actually all these are private. And another thing I want to show you is we can actually, once we replace all these as private, we can actually find all these once instead of every frame, right? We can actually call on enable, and this should happen whenever we select, right? Whenever we first enable the inspector and we draw it. So we can actually find these once. And so what we need to do is we need to fill all these properties by searching on the monster data and finding the property we want, like whether it's name, monster type, whatever, and filling it in. And then we could just take that and then we can draw it. And we have a lot of other options we can use once we do that. So on enable, that's going to be tedious. Name, yeah, again, maybe we just copy paste these right here. Just be a little careful with copy pasting. You can get yourself into trouble. But we're going to need to search to find all these anyways. Looks very messy right now. Okay, once we get rid of all these, bring that back out. Indent, 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 indent. Oops, indent. Oh boy. Okay. So what we're looking for is our serialized object, which we get from the inspector window. Like the inspector window, when we click the object that it's associated with, then we get access to the object. So essentially we're getting access to the monster data type right here. We're doing this instead of the target thing that we were doing before. This is the more protected, proper way to do it. Once we have the serialized object, we can go into it and we have something called find property. So we can look on this object for the serialized name, right? Monster type, chance to drop, whatever. And the nice thing about this is because we're going to search to find this thing, the downside is we're doing a search by name, which is not, ideal, but the upside is we can actually find private variables by doing this. So we don't really care about scope or anything. We can actually find the private variable named name, right? So we're going to find the private variable of the name. Now this is where it's really important that you are consistent with your names here, otherwise it will not find it. And then we're just going to do the same thing, right? Let's just copy this part and we'll say equals monster type, where it has to be a string already. Chance to drop item. If you want to be really careful about this, then you can actually come in here. You can copy, paste, range of awareness. Oops. Let's actually copy this right here. Okay, and this part's just kind of tedious, so I'm going to do this, and you're essentially going to do this for every one of your properties here. Remember, redrawing your custom editor from scratch is not fun. That's why I spent so much time showing you the easier ways to do it, is because you may not need to, right? Like you can add some additional stuff around it. You can create some little attributes. You can do a lot of cool stuff without having to custom redraw it. But if you do need to custom redraw it, or if you just want the practice, you can. And we'll do it this way. Just to show you all your options. We'll take this a little step at a time. Serialized object, find property, health. Okay, serialized object, find property. So assuming that all these names are correct, we have access to all of our properties. Now, once we have this, you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to uncomment this like that. so that we can see it and we can compare side by side. Okay, so this is our original. And so now below that, I'm just going to redraw, right? Like I'm just going to redraw all of these and try to match it. So let's put this side by side. What do we need? First, we want to display our label, general stats. Oh, actually, I did forget something. First of all, because we don't need our data anymore, right? We don't really need that. And we'll have to fix these, right? So instead of label field data.name.toUpper, instead we're just going to use our property that we found. So it'll just be score name. And we don't even need that, right? Oh, and when we go inside of our property, here's the other thing you should know. When we go inside of a property, we actually need to access what type of value it is. So in this case, it's a string. We can store lots of different types of values inside of our property, but we need our string value. Okay. So we're saying our name, string value, toUpper. So we just need to double check, what this value is, right? Like, right, it's just a serialized property, but what is it really? It is a string. So we do need to be consistent about this. It's the other thing to watch out for. Let's see, we need to do the same thing for health. Now here's something weird. All these are ints. Okay, so that'll be easier for us. Technically, you can store a float value and an int value, and it doesn't automatically convert it for you. So if we say, for example, health dot, if we thought it was a float value, it would come up as 0, right? Because it's not a float value. It's actually a int right here. So I want to say int value. And we'll do the same thing with our, put this on multiple lines. Why not? We'll say damage dot int value, and we'll say speed dot int value. Okay, funky stuff. All right, so we're just fixing our errors here, and then finally helper box name dot string value, remember? And then health. Right, this is our property, right? Properties that we found the thing here, and we just need to make sure that we access the right type. Dot int value. Okay. All right, I think we fixed all of our errors. Let's save it and come back in here. All right, we haven't really drawn anything. We're still just drawing the base inspector, right? So this is where I'm going to put my custom GUI here, right? Right in here. And then we'll comment this out. I just want to see it top to bottom so I can compare. Alrighty, so let's do it this way. Let's start from the top. We'll say general stats. What's the first thing we need? We need a label field. So editor GUI layout. We did this part already, right? Put a label field. And we need to just give it a little header, right? General stats. General stats. Again, we can do our editor styles. Yeah, dot bold font. Okay. Why is that an error? Hold on. Oh, we need a dot here. Dot label field. Okay, that's what we're missing. And it's bold label, right? So just check it with the top. Alrighty, let's come back in here. Okay, so we're starting to redraw it from top to bottom. Okay, doing that. Now here's another thing to remember. Because we're doing the serialized property version, if we change a value, we need to tell the object that the value was changed so that we can save it, right? Like we can edit the value, but we need to actually tell it to save if we're going to do this custom redrawing thing. So we're going to actually check here. So serialized object update. If I think it's dirty. Update serialized object's representation only if the object has been modified since the last update call or if it is a script. Okay, so basically this just updates it if we make a change. And this part's important too at the very end. So at the very top, we're just going to say update if we make a change. At the very bottom, we're going to say serialized object. If we made a change, apply it. All right, so look for it, display, and then save it if we have it. If we made a change. Okay, all right, with those out of the way, let's come back here. Okay, so now you're starting to see like editor scripting can get kind of weird and dirty. Again, they're new systems. We're just kind of learning the old one. Just it's good practice, and you may come across these scripts. You know, who knows how long it takes to deprecate the system, or if you're working on old old code, whatever. It's important to know, but again, like this is just a really intro level into it. Custom GUI. Okay, so general sets. Yeah, let's just keep going. Now to draw the properties it's actually very simple once we set it up this way. All we need to do, editor GUI layout dot property field, and we can do the same thing for all of them. Which one? Underscore name, right? Which property to draw? The name, right? That's the next thing we're going to draw. And then we need to give it a label. So these are called labels. And this is our property field that we're drawing. And we need to give it the label to put here. And we'll just call that name. Actually, we have to do something a little funky. New GUI content name. Okay, that's how we draw this thing over here. To label each of our properties. Already. Give us a little bit more room here. Okay, so if I save that and I come back, okay, it draws our name, but it actually draws it twice. Right now, it's actually assigning our header up here, and it's kind of double rendering that because this is being assigned to this this property right here. So we're just going to remove our header functions. So we're going to remove that, that, which, you know, comparing it side by side, it's going to change that. So that's just a little weird, but if you remove that, should get rid of it. Okay, so now we can actually see what we're doing. Okay, general stats, and you'll see how it condensed it all up here. It's just a weird thing when you're working with custom GUIs. And now that you can see how this works, we're just going to keep going, right? Like there's a lot more stuff to redraw, and it's going to be pretty simple after we get this all set up. We're just going to draw a lot of property fields. So let's keep going. Let's see, what's the next thing? Monster type dragon. Editor GUI layout. Property field. Monster type. New GUI content. Monster type. We can start to format our words a little bit differently now because we're actually deciding the exact string to put here, right? Like what if I only wanted to say type? It's not pulling, oh, on space here. It's not pulling it from the exact variable name anymore. Oh, right here. We can actually customize the label, which is a little neat. Like we couldn't really do that easily before, so that's something, but I actually do want monster type. Give that a new line. Okay, what else? We're just gonna keep going top to bottom. Let's do a, this one is a little bit different because we have our slider, right? So we can actually draw that. So we're going to access our chance to drop property. Remember, we do have to be specific if it's a float or an int. You can always look back here, chance to drop. We're just going to create a custom slider. Chance to drop item dot float value. So they're going to move the slider, and we want to assign the float value based on where they slid to. It's equal to editor GUI layout. And, you know, we could look this stuff up. I looked this up ahead of time. I don't have all this memorized, but editor GUI layout slider. And we can look at all the things. So value, left value, right value. So basically our current value, our minimum, and our max. Our current value is, you know, pull whatever the current value is. So let's actually, that current value, that's the middle point in the slider, right? This middle point right here. So the minimum is 0 and the maximum is 100. And semicolon. Okay, I'm just breaking that up into multiple lines for readability. And actually, let's do it this way. All right, let's save it and check that out. Okay, so we have our slider, but we don't actually have a label for it. Which maybe that's fine. Maybe we'll add a label above it, right? We could do something like that. We could do editor GUI layout, label field, chance to drop item. Let's mix it up. Item drop chance. Let's try that. Like we could start to customize this a little bit more. Like that's fine. So that's sliders. We'll keep it simple after that. We'll just draw a couple more properties, editor GUI layout. You know, we can compare side by side. You can already see how we can start to customize if we want. Okay, let's just draw another property. I hope I'm reiterating that this is very tedious. Yeah, I mean, this is the downside of redrawing your own custom inspector, right? Do again, just like above, awareness, We'll simplify that variable name. I'll put that on the salt line. Okay. And then what else? We have CanEnterCombat. GUI layout. A property field. CanEnterCombat. So this is our property. GUI content. CanEnterCombat. We'll add a little question mark there. Okay, let's come back here and compare. Okay, cool. Okay, so we have the top part. We can keep going. Maybe I add a little space here. Editor GUI layout. Space. A lot of this you kind of have to just remember. Right? It's not glamorous. So we don't really have anything underneath there yet. So now we'll have our combat stats. Now here's a cool thing. We can decide when to draw these stats. So maybe we only draw them if this CanEnterCombat is true. So, for example, we could create our condition here. If CanEnterCombat, remember, we have to go inside the property and get its type, right? CanEnterCombat, it's a Boolean, which we remember over here. Right here. It's Boolean. So look at its Boolean value, bool value. If our bool value is equal to false, or you could do the little not symbol if you like. Oh, sorry, if it's true, right? Then we want to draw our combat stats, or you could simplify this to just be if true, but I'll be a little explicit here. So then, if it's true, we can draw our combat properties, which is our damage, health, and speed. So let me actually we're going to do a little more copy paste here. Right, and then we'll change this to damage, health, and speed. We could actually change the order of these. It doesn't really matter, right? Because we're only deciding how to display it. We don't need to align it with the actual script anymore. We can change the order of things, right? We can shift things around if we want, but you know, don't have to. Yeah, I mean, I'll just show you, right? We could take this line, move it up here if we want. Maybe health is the most important, right? So maybe we'll move that up here. Health, speed, and damage. I don't know. Cool. And we did add a space here, but check this out. If we deselect it, we're actually hiding it. That's kind of neat, right? So we can actually simplify it for the designer even further, right? Like we could do other things based on conditions. We can hide certain information that is no longer relevant. You know, if it doesn't have an awareness, don't show it. If it's a certain type of enemy, hide the elemental properties or something. The key thing here is that we have control now, is we can control how the stuff is displayed. It takes a long time to set up, but we have more control. So that is the benefit of it. Let's keep going. We're almost done. We'll do dialogue. We'll do another space here. Editor. We can also change the spacing now, which I guess we could do with the attributes before. And then finally, we will have our battle cry. So let's say editor GUI layout dot property field battle cry. You know, same as we've been doing. Like that's kind of the nice thing about doing all the property stuff. Like it's the proper way, but also it's pretty easy. We just draw the property field and it does it. Okay, new GUI content. What is this? Battle cry. What are we doing? Compare battle cry. Okay. Right, and then it shifts downwards if we don't need it. And we could change the spacing too if we want. Maybe we'll change that to 10 and 10. You know, here's another thing. We can actually change the indent level if you didn't already know. I think it's editor GUI layout dot indent. Nope. Dot. Okay, editor GUI dot indent level. Increase it. ++. Editor GUI dot indent level -. Right. Indent and then stop indenting. Let's try this. Check this out. Right, we could just indent it a little bit, a little nicer. You can already start to compare as above. I mean, this has its benefits, but this is a little nicer, right? We can actually still do our helper boxes and whatnot. Oh, let's label this right here too, our battle cry. We'll put dialogue label here. Layout.label, field, dialogue. And then our GUI editor styles dot bold label. There we go. Okay, dialog, journal stats. Okay, okay. Oh, I know. Right here, combat stats. Do the same thing. Or GUI layout. Oop. Dot, label field. Combat stats. Editor styles. You can see now we're starting to actually, we've gotten past all the setup stuff and we're kind of like working on the formatting. Oops, save it. CanEnterCombat, combat stats. Okay. Oh, this is the cool part. Remember how we had our helper boxes and we had to put them at the very bottom? Well, what if we actually put the helper box right underneath the thing that it's relevant to, right? So maybe if string value is empty, then maybe we put that right underneath the name. So let's come up here. So I did a cut right here, this help box that we made. Cut and bring this all the way up to our property field name. Right there, our helper box. So check this out. If I save this, if it doesn't have a name, oh, right here, sorry, not the top one, the bottom one. So if it doesn't have a name, we can put it right underneath there. So that's kind of cool. Before we couldn't do that, right? We had to put it all the way at the bottom. But now we can actually put it exactly where we want. So again, more control, right? I'm going to call this like Lizardman. Okay. We can put this right where it's relevant instead of stacking at the bottom, which again has more power and more customization. Okay, we had one more helper box, didn't we? Empty. If our health value, right? Yeah, we could do that. That's fine. Take our health value, put it over here. Remember, we changed the order here too, so it doesn't need to be in the same order. It's only there if we want. And you can see how this code looks crazy, right? Like we could start to break this out if we want, whatever makes sense for what you're doing. I find myself using more comments in editor scripting than other kinds of scripting. Okay, right. So if we have -10 health and put it right there, right? See, like it's kind of nice, right? We can customize this a little bit better and make this easier to use. Yeah, so I think we redrew this whole thing. So let's take out the top part. We'll comment out this base.onInspector GUI because we don't want to draw the base anymore, right? Let's say we like this version better, which I think is better. Take that out. And yeah, save it. Come back over here. Cool, and this is our final result, right? Like we can do some cool little custom stuff and some little checks, some usability, and just all around. We can keep adding to this if we want, which is really nice. So I know this is pretty involved and a lot of code, but hopefully you get the concepts, right? Like whatever you want to do is just going to depend on your data. But hopefully this gives you a couple pointers on how to do this stuff. I tried to mix up the variety on the type of things here. So like talking about indents and hiding values and using property fields, which is, admittedly more complicated and has a few extra barriers, but you can see how it can be easier later on to do that. Just make sure that you at the top you check for it, and then the bottom you apply any changes to them. So, or you have to go back and put the new values into the monster data. All right, so we made it. This is our first big dive into editor scripting. We'll keep poking at this, and then maybe we'll work into other types of editor scripting as well. So hope you made it through. Look through the code, take time to digest it, and hope to see you in the next video.